Hello friends, in this unit up till now we have discussed the hardware resources, the computer software resources as well as the computer networking. Now let us talk a little bit about the data before moving on to the various systems that are used to store the data, right? So you know that data is the raw fact, basically raw facts, and when they are processed they convert into information, right? So for example, the data that Facebook collects is how many times you have browsed the site, what all comments have you posted, what all photographs, which all photographs you have liked, what are your other browsing habits, browsing activities. Now all this is data, and then when it is processed this becomes information, right? So the Facebook can process your data, your browsing habits, your browsing history, and they can find out what are your requirements, at what kind of products you are looking for, and what is your personality profile. Now this becomes information. How do we collect the data? You know, we have discussed in research methodology also. We saw that there are methods of collecting data like observation, but observation is not only human observation, but it is machine observation as well. Then we have got interviews, you conduct surveys. So these are various methods of collection of data. Now for example, in organizations generally machine observation is used a lot. For example, the biometric device which has been installed in our college to record the attendance of the teachers, and which is also going to be now installed to record the attendance of the students. Please understand, this is an example of machine observation. And why? Because the machine is now making this observation whether a particular teacher is present or not, depending on whether he has punched in his attendance in the morning or not, right? So this is how machine observation takes place. Then I can convert this data to find out how many teachers arrive on time and how many teachers arrive late. This would become information, right? When you go to your let's say an organized retail shop, for example the By Chance or the Vishal Mega Marts or the big bazaars, what happens when you are leaving the store after having made all the purchases, and when you are making the payments, you would be billed using a barcode scanner, and this barcode scanner would basically be doing what? It would basically be keeping a record of what all products have you purchased by scanning the barcode on the product, right? So this again is example of machine observation, and as I said, machine observations are also used for collection of data. Then as I said, data has to be processed into information, otherwise it is of no use. Now this again is very, very important. You should understand that it is the data which determines the quality of information. If the data is of bad quality, if the data has so many errors, inaccuracies, then the information will also be inaccurate, it will also be error prone. You have seen this dictum, you have talked about this dictum. There is a dictum, garbage in, garbage out. So if you enter a data which is inaccurate, factually incorrect, then naturally the information that can be obtained by processing that data is also not going to be accurate. So this is what we mean by garbage in and garbage out. So you have to ensure that the data which has been entered, it should not have any inaccuracy. Then only you can reliably say that the information obtained by processing that data is of some use and is accurate. Fine. Now let us talk about the data management system. How do we manage the data? See, earlier there used to be the file management systems. which you can see here on the left. This one is the file management system, and on the right of the screen is the database system. Now please understand what is the meaning of file management system. I'll give you an example. Suppose you want to, let's say you have a bank account and you are withdrawing some money from that particular bank account, and you keep depositing also and keep withdrawing also, right? And then you decide that you will start your own business venture. So you want to apply it to the loan department of the same bank branch also. Now basically, essentially now you are doing two things. One is you have maintained a saving bank account and you are depositing money and you are withdrawing money on a regular basis, and then you have now applied also for loan from the same bank branch. Now what will happen in the traditional system? Each application defines its data. Now please understand what do we mean by this. Here there are two applications. One is the cash management system from which you are withdrawing the money, or from which you can understand how much money has been withdrawn by you and how much money has been deposited by you. Now this is one application which the cashier will be working on, and then there would be another application which will be taking care of all the loan requests and loan approvals, and that would be the job of the loan manager. Now when you go to the former, which is being operated by the cashier, you simply withdraw your money and the same information is fed into the computer, same data is fed into the computer. Now please understand, these two people, the loan manager and the cashier, who are actually performing two different functions, basically are using their individual independent applications, right? What basically this means is that the information that the cashier has, the data that the cashier has, cannot be used by the loan manager, and the data which has been collected by the loan manager cannot be used by the cashier, because they are using different applications to manage their data, to store their data, to enter their data, and to retrieve their data. Is this fine? Right? So what could be the problem? There could be so many problems, right? So we'll be discussing all these problems. I have given you the background. So this is the example that I'll be using to describe to you the file management system. So now each application has its own data and it defines its data in its own manner. So the cashier would define the cashier's application, the application which is meant for the cashier to work on and to enter the data, that would be having a separate data, and the file structure would also be different, and the stored data can only be accessed by that particular application. So the data which has been stored there can only be made use by the cashier only, right? Because this is different from the application that the loan manager is using. Is this okay? Now this is the meaning of file management system. So you have got different files for different applications. Is this okay? So each application defines its data, creates file structure and stores data to be accessed by its application program, and each application will own their data. So the cashier application, which is meant for the cashier, the cash application, will store its own data and it would not be sharing it with the loan manager application. Fine. The loan application which is being used by the loan manager. Now what are the benefits of this kind of a system? Please understand. Easy to operate. It would be easier to operate. Why? Because the data has been defined depending on the requirements of the application. So for the cash application, the data has been defined in a different manner according to the requirement of that particular application. So it is easy for them to control, easy for them to operate on, and better local control. Nobody else can make changes because the data which has been collected, entered by the cashier on the cash application, that data would remain with that particular application. It is not to be shared with any other application. Nobody else can manipulate that data. Nobody else can make any changes to that data, which is the meaning of this particular statement that the local control is much better. However, there can be drawbacks. What can be the drawbacks? Data duplication. Naturally, now the customer name would have to be mentioned in two places. One, when the customer has gone for cash withdrawal. So in the cash application, the customer name has to be mentioned in the beginning, or his account number has to be mentioned in the beginning. And then when he goes for loan approval or loan application, there also this information, this particular data has to be entered and maintained. Don't you think it would be data duplication? It would basically be data duplication. Why? Because you have to basically enter the same data again and again. You will have to enter the Aadhaar card details again and again, for once for the cash application and on the second occasion for the loan application, right? So this would basically cause data duplication, and there could be data inconsistency. At one place, the name of the applicant could be Vikrant Singh Bisht. On the other occasion, the name of the application could be VS Bisht. Though the person is the same, the person who is withdrawing the money is the same, who is making the application for loan, the person is the same. However, the name has been mentioned in a slightly different manner in the two different places, in the two different files. Now this would cause inconsistency. If I want to find out the record, I would not be able to understand that this guy, Mr. Vikrant Singh Bisht, who has withdrawn 1000 rupees, is the same guy who has made an application for loan in the name of Mr. VS Bisht. You understand? So there's going to be data inconsistency. The data would look very, very different. Data would not be same throughout. Fine. So the data would not match in the two applications. Then the data would depend on the application. Data dependency on application. What do we mean by this? Since each application, we talked about the two applications, the cash application and the loan application. So in the cash application, data was entered and the data structure was defined depending on the requirements of the application. While the requirements of the loan application would be different, so there they would define the data in their own manner. So naturally, if you want to use other applications' data, then you will have to modify your application, because the data has been defined in different fashion. The cash application has defined the data in a different fashion, right? Let's say there's a particular field in the cash data which talks about the daily deposit limit. How much money can the customer deposit on a daily basis, the maximum amount of money that he can deposit. However, since now naturally this particular field is there because this is a data that the cash application requires, so they have designed and structured the data in their own manner, in their own fashion, as per their own requirement. But the loan manager would not have any use for this particular data. So even if the loan application wants to use the same data which has been collected by cash application, this particular data as to what is the maximum amount of money that the customer can deposit in a particular day, this particular data is of no use to the loan application, right? So application programs would need modification to use other application data. Now this is the meaning of data dependency on application. The data would depend on the type of application, on the requirements of application. Fine. And then there would be lack of integration. What do we mean by this? Lack of integration. It is going to be difficult for you to have at one place, because now there are two different data sets which are getting generated. One is the amount of money withdrawn and deposited in the saving account. The other one is the amount of money requested as loan. Now it is difficult for me to integrate the two data and understand that this guy, this is the same person who is withdrawing this much amount and depositing this much amount in the saving account, and who is also made an application for loan dispersal of this amount. I would find it difficult to integrate the two sets of data actually. Fine, and see how problematic can it be. Because see, for example, I'll give you an example. For example, every single day, or let's say every month, you deposit 5,000 rupees in your account, and you are also withdrawing 3,000 rupees in your account from your account. Do you think if you apply for a loan of 20 crore, this should be approved? No, because your saving account balance and saving account transaction record does not seem to suggest that you might be using this kind of a amount, 20 crores. So naturally this kind of loan would never be approved for you. However, if you apply for a loan of rupees 10,000, this might be approved, right? So when such data is integrated, it is easier for the users of the data to make some decisions. However, this is the luxury which file management system does not allow you. You simply cannot integrate the data, you simply cannot find out. Is this okay? I hope this is something that you are able to understand. Let's discuss the database system. Hopefully you would be better able to understand the difference between the two. Now here what will happen now, this is the modern system that we have, right? This is the modern system that we have, and now what happens is data items are logically integrated and data storage is centralized. Now this is the most important aspect. So you have got one single data storage, and that data storage is known as the database, right? Fine. So that would be called the database, and since this database is there, it will include all the possible kind of data which is required by any of the applications, right? Now let us understand what will happen in the database system, and this is what actually happens when you go to a bank branch. We do not have a file management system as of now. Now in the bank branches, earlier it used to be the case, but now this is no more there. Now we have got a database system. Now what will happen? There would be a central database. Let's say it is in the server in the bank branch. It will contain all data regarding the various customers who are there, their name, age, their Aadhaar number, for example, whether they have applied for loan earlier or not, and if they have applied, whether they have been able to pay on time, what is their transaction record, how much do they transact on a particular day, what kind of loan have they applied for earlier. So all this information would be centralized, and this central database, this central storage would be known as the database, right? Now this is the modern system, and the data items would be integrated in a logical fashion. They would make sense. This is how they are going to be integrated. For example, the name, then the date of birth, then the Aadhaar card number, then the Aadhaar card authentication data, the results of the fingerprint match, for example, then the amount of money in the saving bank, then the daily transaction record. So all these data would be integrated in a very, very logical fashion, right? Now what will happen now? This will give you the advantage of sharing the information and in fact sharing the data among the applications. So all the applications which are there, they would be able to share the data. Is this understood? And there would be no duplication and inconsistency. How can there be a duplication? Because there is one central storage, there can be no duplication, because one particular information is being entered only once. So let's say when you opened up an saving bank account, all your information was entered there, right? And maybe 2 years down the line you are starting your own venture and you have applied for a loan. Now the moment you apply for a loan, based on what your customer identity is, in the field against your name, the loan amount would also now be mentioned. So the data was created right in the beginning when you went there and when you opened up your account. Now this addition would take place, that now you also have taken a loan of rupees 5 lakh. So there are no chances of duplication and no chances of inconsistency. We saw in file management system the name could be spelled in different manner in two different places. I hope you remember the example. But this would not be the case here, because the data is being entered only once. The name is not going to be entered again and again. It is going to be entered just once. So once you have gone there and you have got your saving bank account opened, the name was entered. After that, a particular ID was generated and given to you. And based on that ID, next time when you go and apply for loan, the ID would get to know. Based on the ID, the system would get to know that you have applied for the loan, and you would not be asked for your Aadhaar card number again or your name or date of birth again, right? And data is independent of applications. What do we mean by this? Since the data was not designed for a particular application, so it is data which can be made use of by any kind of application. That is what we mean by saying data is independent of the application, right? Any application can use it. Data design does not depend on the application. Now there is a centralized database. The cash application is also making use of it. The loan application is also making use of it. So the data does not depend on which kind of application is it designed for, right? Data integrity. Now data integrity can also be protected. What do we mean by data integrity? Means accuracy of the data can also be protected. How? See, in these kind of systems what happens is, who can access the record, who can enter the data in the record, who can modify the data, who can access it, everything is specified, and not every individual is given the authority to do that, right? So for example, the cashier would not have the authority to approve your loan. That authority would only be given to the loan manager, and when the loan manager uses his login ID to log into his account, then he can approve the loan. He cannot approve the loan by logging into by somebody else login account, through somebody else login account. So the cashier can only do the cash transactions. The manager can only approve the loan application. He can only decide the loan application. So these things are defined in this kind of a database system. So this is what is known by access control. What do we mean by access control? Who can access the database? Who can edit it? Who can make modifications in it? Who can retrieve information from the database? Everything is controlled. Everything is controlled. How and how is everything controlled? You as a user would be given a login account. If you enter the login ID and enter the password and actually log in using that account, then only you would be able to access the data, right? So not everybody would be given this kind of a access facility. So access would be controlled, and this would keep the data integrity intact. It would keep the data free from unnecessary errors and free from unnecessary modifications. Only those who are authorized to make modifications can make modifications. Not everybody can do that. Easy recovery from failure. Now what is the meaning of easy recovery from failure? Whenever we have got these kind of database systems, we generally keep a backup database also. So whenever there's a problem with the database, you can always fall back on the backup database. Generally this is just not possible in file processing systems and file management systems. What happens? For every single file, if you start keeping a backup file, then it is going to be very, very costly, because there would be so many files, so many file would be created, and then so many backup files would be created, right? This is not the case with database, because you have got just one database, so you have to back it up, so you need just one more backup database, and that is why it is easier to recover if in case this kind of database crashes down. Now what are the drawbacks? Naturally the drawback is, number one, it is going to be expensive. Why is it going to be expensive? The database system is going to be expensive. Please understand, it has been mentioned here Why is it going to be expensive? Infrastructure for centralized data storage. You need to have some infrastructure for centralized data storage. In bank branches, for example, standalone bank branches, they would be having their own server, so that is the infrastructure for central data storage, centralized data storage. However, if you go to a bank which is now a CBS, core banking solution, is offering you, and all the branches are connected, you can make withdrawal anywhere and deposit your money in any of the bank branches, then what will happen? In those cases, the database is kept at some central server, maybe located in their headquarters. Fine. So now you need to have some centralized database, some centralized storage space, which would require some investment. Then you would require more disk space for storage. The disk space would be more. You would require quite some disk space for storage, because now all the data is with the database. It is not lying in different files. Earlier it was lying in different files, but now all this data is in the same database. Naturally you would require more storage space. Again, processing cost is higher. Why? Because there is elaborate procedure for access. I have given you an example. So manager will log in from his account, so he can only access the information meant for him when he logins from his account. So you have to define all these processes, and then the manager will have to log in to his account. He cannot go and tell his peon, okay, log in from my account, please make these changes. That he simply cannot do. In file processing system, this was, in file management system, this was possible, right? Higher data security. Higher data security cost. So you have to secure the data also. Secure the data, why? Because see, you have got one centralized data storage, and you've got a backup for that. Now what if some virus infects your database? Then it's going to be a big problem for you. What if somebody makes unauthorized changes? That is again going to be a big problem for you. So first security measure that you have taken was to control the access through passwords. So password protected access, password enabled access control. So everybody was able to access only when he or she is entering his password and his or she is logging from his or her account, right? So this was the first thing that you did, but then you have to do other things also. You have to have good kind of antivirus systems working to secure your database from external virus attacks. You have got to keep the data safe by installing systems through which whenever there is some kind of unauthorized access, you get to know that okay, some unauthorized access has happened today. So these kind of systems have to be installed, and that is why the data security costs are going to be higher. And again, even then there would be a risk of data loss. Had data been lost in the file management system, you are losing data of just one file, so that is not going to make a big difference. But now in the database system, there is one centralized database, and if somehow something happens to the database, now no application would be able to run. You would not be simply able to do anything because it was the only database that you had, right? On the other hand, if something happens to the files, you can still work on the other files which are there, which are still safe. This would not be possible with the database system, and that is the drawback of the database system. However, the benefits of the database system over the file management system are much more than the drawbacks they have in comparison to the file management system, and that is why you would find that in most places nowadays we use the database system. Thank you very much.